We're live. Countdown. Hi, I'm Willie Bragg, and today we're going to discuss the American black tradition to socialism. And I think it's kind of fitting that to say that, be it that is Black History Month. And I want to start by saying, start with Martin Luther King. That's who we will start with. And you know, it's really funny when people get partisan about Dr. King. For many, many years, the Republicans got into the game and saying, well, Martin Luther King, we stand by the values of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King would have been a Republican today. You know, he was a conservative. Blah, 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 blah. You hear that from them. And you hear the liberals double up and say, no, Martin Luther King is in our tradition, and we embrace the values of Martin Luther King. Both Democrats and Republicans are wrong as hell. It's true that Martin Luther King was a registered Republican at one time. Remember, in the South, the Democrats were the institutional racist party. Not all Democrats, but it was the party of segregation, the Jim Crow people. And I know there are people that disagrees with me when I say this. Some Jim Crow Democrats, many of them will find their way into the Republican Party eventually by the latter 60s, 70s, and in the 1980s. Over the years, a lot of them would just end up becoming Republican. Those that remain Democrats, those white Jim Crow Democrats, they would just be like, okay, I guess might as well embrace civil rights. It's a settled issue. So that's really the true deal of when it comes to the partisan politics of race and what I call the Great Switch, or another term I like to use. Oh well, it's already been used as the Southern Strategy. And and those that dismiss what I have to say, I'm going to put it this way. The state of Maine used to be one of the most reliably Republican Party states around. And now it's pretty much a solid blue state. It's a Democratic state. Mississippi was the most reliably Democratic voting state for a long time. And now it is reliably Republican. Do the science, do the math, do whatever, you know it computes. So anyway, the thing about Martin Luther King was he was an advocate for civil rights more than anything else. But was he, what was he politically? He was a democratic socialist. Some even said that, well, there are people out there that said he was a member of the Communist Party USA, and that's not true. I used to say he orbited around the Socialist Party of America. I was told that he was actually a member of the Socialist Party of America. And you have to remember, he wrote an essay called The Greatest Man I've Ever Known, which was a book, a small little essay about, well, I'll tell you who he was about in a second. The premise of the book was that there was an adult African American man with his son, and they were listening to this man speak. It was a white man, and as the white man was speaking, the little young child asked his daddy, "Who is this man?" And the father replied, "Oh, he's Norman Thomas. He was with us before all the other white folks decided to join us." I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically the premise. And also, it meant pretty much that's where he politically orbited. And for those who don't know, and I think most people do in this audience, Norman Thomas was the presidential candidate for the Socialist Party of America from 1948 to 1928 to 1948. And a lot of people said that he convinced his platform convinced FDR to adopt the New Deal measures that actually got us out of this Great Depression. Uh, when Martin Luther King delivered his speech in 1963, the March for Jobs and Freedom, and the "I Have a Dream" speech, Norman Thomas sat near him as he was giving that speech. So, for partisan reasons, I'm going to tell you that Martin Luther King was a member of the Socialist Party of America. Um, well, when it comes to Martin Luther King, we also have to remember there were people that were around that were fighting the good fight prior to Martin Luther King. And I will argue that A. Philip Randolph, founder of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and in my opinion, he was one of the first African Americans who work within the labor movement to try to grow the middle class. The growing middle class within the black community in America, honestly, in my opinion, can be traced to this man, A. Philip Randolph. Because he knew that trade unions and economic justice would be the key for black liberation in this country. And as I said, in many ways, I think he was the head of the movement before Martin Luther King came along. And to basically cement my example of that was he was planning for a march in Washington in 1943, which was a thorny issue for President Franklin Roosevelt at the time. And he pleaded with A. Philip Randolph to call off this march. And he was determined to keep this march going. A. Philip Randolph basically told the Roosevelt administration that he's not going to back down. But eventually, what happened is Franklin Roosevelt made a promise to A. Philip Randolph: if he calls off this march, I will, by executive order, through the power of the pen, desegregate the city of Washington, D.C. And so in 1943, Washington, D.C., if you consider the District of Columbia as part of the South, if you want to consider it that, well, Washington, D.C. was desegregated in 1943. So you can argue that D.C. was the most integrated city in the physical geographic South. Thank you to A. Philip Randolph for this happening. And of course, in 1963, he did set up what was called the March for Jobs and Freedoms. And where Martin Luther King made his I Have a Dream speech. And for the record, A. Philip Randolph was also a member of that same Socialist Party of Eugene Victor Debs and Norman Thomas. So, while, as I said, A. Philip Randolph essentially was the Martin Luther King before Martin Luther King came in as far as the leader of the movement. There's also Barrett Rustin, a peace activist, a socialist, and at a time when it was not an open matter, a practicing homosexual who was very, very open about it. A member of the Socialist Party of America as well. Barrett Rustin helped Martin Luther King develop the strategy for nonviolence, peaceful resistance, as a means for racial equality. he would have been better known in the movement, except for the fact that he was gay, and that was not an open matter back then. And because everyone knew what would happen, the movement would be discredited if there was a practicing homosexual on the national stage of this movement. So, Baird Rustin saw this happening, and at the time, with the element of realism that was going on, he had to step back. And unfortunately, Baird Rustin and A. Philip Randolph are not given their proper due in the movement for racial equality in this country. There's really no talk about Baird Rustin nor A. Philip Randolph during Black History Month. And I just think it's a shame. I'm all for Martin Luther King being talked about because he's important, but so was Baird Rustin. So was A. Philip Randolph. As I said, I just think it's it's a shame that these two figures are not being talked about. Now, as you all know, I'm a democratic socialist, a social democrat. I consider it one and the same. I am not what you would call i.e., a communist or Marxist Leninist, and it's just not my orientation. I'm fine with those who believes in it. Fred Hampton, who was the one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party, a practicing Marxist Leninist Maoist, in his own way, kind of came to the same conclusion that A. Philip Randolph and Baird Rustin came up with a class analysis of society. Martin Luther King did too. What makes Fred Hampton a little different was the fact that he was with the Black Power movement, Black Panther Party, and for anything that one could say, and people would say, "Oh, they're just prejudice against white people." You can have to understand why there was a prejudice against white people by various members of the Black Panther Party, but that was not the Black Panther Party. Sort of like today, a lot of people think that Black Lives Matter is a black supremacist movement. It is not. It's a movement to try to put a stop to police brutality. And there's nothing extreme about that. Well, with regard to Fred Hampton realized that the only way you're going to have equality for his fellow blacks, for all African Americans, is through the class struggle. And that, there's a lot of poor whites out there. And he did what he could to link black poor people and black white people together in a common cause to challenge the shortcomings that exist within capitalism. Well, that was just enough for the FBI to act, COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, because this is what was going on in the 60s, that the counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, and the FBI were infiltrating a lot of left-wing groups and causing a lot of disruptions within them. And there was a lot of political assassinations that was going on back then. Rumor has it that the FBI, along with some militants within the Nation of Islam, the rumor has it that working together to kill Malcolm X. Well, sounds like that's what happened with Fred Hampton. That he was assassinated because they saw him as a threat. Well, I'm not sure if the FBI were involved with the murder of Martin Luther King. The fact is that Martin Luther King was murdered. And what would raise suspicions about as to why he was murdered was that, in Tennessee, where he was assassinated, he was actually organizing for garbage workers to organize into a union, and that was enough to upset the powers that be. Powers that be did not want to see a strong labor movement, which is sad because the labor movement then was a hell of a lot stronger than it is today. Um, Having that said, I think maybe for some, it's possible that they saw Martin Luther King as a threat because Martin Luther King was, in some ways, he was written off as a divisive figure, but in a lot of ways, he was a unifying figure. And the powers that be assassinated him in 1968. Well, in 1969, a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, um, late 1969, Fred Hampton was assassinated. And so there is a link that is natural between labor, socialism, and black liberation. And you really can't have one without the other. And black liberation is not just about black liberation. Black liberation is about equality for all people. And that includes white people too. It includes Hispanics, includes Christians, it includes Jews, it includes Muslims, it includes atheists, it includes those from the LGBTQ community. It includes everyone. And we should never forget this. So, I hear some people say, why do black people need their own months? Well, that wouldn't be necessary had the African American population been treated with equality from day one. And the fact that they were treated in a way that was comparable to the Holocaust. Hitler, regarding Whoopi Goldberg's controversial remarks, where she got her 2 week suspension, which I do not agree with. And people want to paint her out as an anti-Semite. She's not. I don't know her, but she's not. The fact that I do agree that her choice of words were not exactly the best expressed. But what was done to the Jews by Hitler in a short amount of time, one could argue, was done technically for 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, the 1900s, technically through 4 centuries here in the New World by the white settlers and the white people against the black population. Going across the Atlantic Ocean and kidnapping whole groups of people against their will across the ocean, selling them, putting them into slavery. I mean, people can't see the inhumanity of that. And then, even when slavery was technically over as a result of the Civil War, to have separate but equal, which was everything opposite of, and especially in the South with the Jim Crow that took place. And with the Jim Crow that took place, the segregation, the lynchings. Once integration became a thing, starting with Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s, all the way to the Civil Rights Act of '64, and by the time 1970s, when it looked like civil rights were on their way to becoming a settled issue. I mean, what was done against a whole group of people for over several centuries is really hard to overcome. And it's going to be a long time before we have any racial healing in this country. And so, I hear people talk about being racially divisive or what have you. And it's just funny when I hear some white people talk about being racially divisive. In a lot of ways, they want to be racially divisive. I hate the term white privilege. I do. But that is white privilege. That's an appropriate example where it is that. And so, I do celebrate Black History Month even though I am as pasty white as this paper, because it comes down to liberation and equality, and some people may look at it as a class reductionist line, but I can make an argument that again, labor advocacy, militant labor advocacy, socialism, black liberation. It's not, it's not divorced from class reductionism, which is kind of a controversial term among the left. I mean, you want to have equality, and Tim Black talks about it when he talks about reparations with regard to when it comes to financial equity. You have a whole group of people in the South that was promised 40 acres and a mule. I mean, that was after the Civil War, and they weren't given that. And it's not just about, well, that was back then, and we need to just move on. It's about trying to correct problems from the past, and financial equity is the way to do this. And it's not just going to be beneficial for African Americans. It's beneficial for all society, for all people, including white people. And so, anyway, these are my words. These are my words right now, almost 10 o'clock in the morning. So if you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you disagree, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we're the muckrakers of our time. We are. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. I'm Willie Bragg. Keep that red flag flying high. Keep that class struggle going. And remember this. We're all Julian Assange. Take care.